In the summer of 2022, the Premier League changed forever. Not because of a trophy, not because of a new manager, but because of one man's paycheck. When Manchester City unveiled Erling Haaland, the headlines focused on his goal-scoring record, a 21-year-old prodigy who had torn through the Bundesliga and the Champions League. But buried beneath the praise was a number so staggering, it sent shockwaves through boardrooms from London to Liverpool. £865,000. That was Haaland's reported weekly package, not just his basic salary, but a cleverly structured combination of wages, performance bonuses and image rights. In pure base wages, he wasn't even the top earner. But when you added the extras, his earnings dwarfed the league average, and even outpaced superstars who'd been dominating for years. It wasn't just a payday. It was a statement. And that statement came with consequences. Rival clubs suddenly faced a new problem. Their best players knew the numbers. Agents had fresh ammunition. Negotiations got harder. The pay gap between elite stars and the rest of the squad widened overnight. But here's the twist. Haaland's deal wasn't just about rewarding talent. It was the product of years of financial maneuvering, a chess match between clubs, agents, and sponsors. A deal that exploited loopholes, maximized brand value, and, whether intended or not, rewrote the Premier League's pay structure. Over the next few minutes, we'll uncover the inside story. How Haaland's camp negotiated one of the most lucrative contracts in English football history. How his salary became the benchmark that other stars demanded. And how this single signing may have set the stage for a wage bubble that could either elevate or destabilize the league. This isn't just a story about football. It's about money, power, and the price of greatness. Before Erling Haaland became one of the most feared strikers in world football, he was just a tall, awkward teenager from a small town in Norway, and the son of a man whose career was cut short by injury. Erling Haaland had been a Premier League player himself, representing Leeds United and Manchester City in the late 1990s. His career ended abruptly after a brutal tackle from Roy Keane, leaving him with lingering injuries and a deep understanding of how fragile a footballer's career could be. That knowledge shaped the way he guided his son. Haaland's early years weren't filled with luxury. Growing up in Brine, a town of just 12,000 people, he trained on small pitches in the cold, often under basic floodlights. There were no big-money academies, no elite sports complexes, just raw talent and relentless work ethic. By the time he was 16, Haaland had already caught the attention of scouts across Europe. But his father and his agent, Mino Raiola, were thinking beyond goals. They were thinking about leverage. When Haaland moved to Molde FK in 2017, managed by Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, the financial stakes were still modest. Norwegian football simply couldn't match the wages of Europe's elite. Even at RB Salzburg, where he exploded onto the Champions League stage in 2019, his salary was tiny compared to Premier League stars, around €20,000 a week. But here's the thing, every move was strategic. At Molde, he developed under a Premier League legend. At Salzburg, he proved himself in European competition. And crucially, his contract included release clauses, exit doors that allowed him to move without clubs paying astronomical transfer fees. When Borussia Dortmund triggered his €20 million clause in 2020, they weren't just buying goals. They were buying a future superstar at a discount. Dortmund's wage offer, reportedly around €130,000 a week, was generous for the Bundesliga, but still far below what Premier League giants could pay. And that was the point. By keeping wages reasonable early on, Haaland's camp maintained flexibility. They knew the real payday would come when he was ready for England, the most lucrative football market on the planet. By 2022, that payday was here. The Premier League had grown into a global financial juggernaut, with broadcasting deals worth over £10 billion. Wages for top strikers had already crossed the £300,000 a week mark. But Haaland's arrival wasn't just going to match that, it was going to smash it. The stage was set for a deal that would shake the entire wage structure. By the time Haaland's Dortmund contract was winding down, the football world was in a bidding war. Only this wasn't the usual free-for-all. His release clause, set at a reported €60 million, meant even the richest clubs could afford him. The real battle was about wages, bonuses, and control. And that's where Haaland's camp played the game differently. His agent, Mino Raiola, and later his team after Raiola's passing, understood one key fact. In modern football, the transfer fee is only part of the story. The true power lies in the player's contract. If the buyout is low, the player can demand more in wages and bonuses. Manchester City had two advantages. They had the cash. They had Pep Guardiola, a manager who could turn Haaland into a legend. But City also faced a problem. The Premier League's wage hierarchy was delicate. Kevin De Bruyne was earning a base of around £375,000 a week, the highest at the club. Offering Haaland more risked unsettling the squad. So City got creative. Instead of a single massive wage figure, they built a layered package. Base salary, around £375,000 per week, in line with De Bruyne. Performance bonuses, scaled rewards for goals, assists, and trophies, worth hundreds of thousands each month. Image rights, a unique arrangement allowing Haaland to earn from his own brand deals without heavy club interference. Loyalty bonuses, payments triggered if he stayed beyond certain contract milestones. When all of this was combined, insiders estimated his total earnings at up to £865,000 per week, a figure that shattered unofficial Premier League ceilings. And then came the goals. A hat-trick against Manchester United. Another against Nottingham Forest. Records falling almost weekly. The return on investment was immediate, not just on the pitch, but commercially. Haaland's shirt sales spiked to rival Cristiano Ronaldo's at Manchester United. City's social media engagement surged. Sponsors wanted in. But here's what made this moment historic. Rival players were watching. Agents were recalculating demands. Mohamed Salah renewed his Liverpool contract for over £350,000 a week. Marcus Rashford's next deal soared past £300,000. Even mid-table clubs felt the ripple effect as squad members began to ask why the wage gap was so wide. The Haaland deal had done more than pay a striker. It had reset expectations. And with those expectations came tension, both inside Manchester City's dressing room and across the league. The biggest payday in Premier League history was about to create its own set of problems. The moment the football world realized just how much power Erling Haaland now had didn't come in a press release. It came on the pitch. October 2, 2022, Manchester Derby. Haaland scores 3 goals, sets up 2 more, and walks off the pitch with the match ball tucked under his arm. In the stands, City fans chant his name like he's been there for a decade. On social media, the highlight reel goes viral within minutes. But behind the celebrations, another conversation was brewing. Within days, reports began surfacing in the press. Haaland's true, weekly earnings weren't the £375,000 base that City officially acknowledged, but closer to £865,000 once bonuses were counted. Whether those numbers were exact didn't matter, the perception was already locked in. And that perception had power. Agents started calling club executives. They wanted Haaland clauses, performance bonuses that could double or triple their clients' wages. Players who were already stars felt underpaid overnight. At Manchester City, the whispers began. Some squad members reportedly questioned the disparity. Others saw it as motivation. Pep Guardiola had to navigate a new kind of dressing room dynamic, one where talent wasn't just measured in goals, but in paychecks. Outside the Etihad, the impact was even bigger. Liverpool's contract standoff with Mohamed Salah suddenly tilted in his favor. He signed a new deal worth over £350,000 a week. Manchester United faced pressure to renew Marcus Rashford at a figure approaching City's top earners. Chelsea, chasing elite forwards, had to budget with Haaland-level wages in mind. The Premier League wage ceiling had been shattered, and it wasn't going back. Commercially, City were thriving. Haaland's name sold shirts in Asia, America, and the Middle East. Sponsorship deals tied to his brand value brought in millions. The club could justify the spend on paper, but for the rest of the league, it was a dangerous precedent. Because here's the problem with wage inflation. Once you raise expectations at the top, everyone else follows. Mid-tier players start asking for raises. Squad depth becomes more expensive. Financial fair play rules tighten. By the time Haaland broke the single-season Premier League goal-scoring record in 2023, his value and his cost had become the ultimate benchmark. Clubs either had to match it or risk losing their stars to those who could. This wasn't just Haaland's peak as a footballer. It was the peak of his influence on the economics of the English game. And what came next would decide whether this wage revolution was sustainable or a ticking time bomb. In the wake of Haaland's record-shattering debut season, the Premier League's financial landscape didn't just adjust, it evolved. Club executives began to speak a new language, one centered on performance-weighted pay structures. If Haaland could earn nearly $1 million a week through bonuses, why not tie other stars' wages to output too? For Manchester City, it was a calculated gamble that paid off. Haaland's bonuses were only triggered when he delivered, and he delivered almost every week. But for other clubs, copying the model wasn't so simple. Not every player could guarantee 40-plus goals a season. Still, the ripple effect was undeniable. Contract clauses became more complex, with Haaland-style goal and assist milestones. Image rights deals grew in importance, as clubs realized they could offset wages by allowing players more freedom in personal branding. Release clauses started appearing more in English contracts, a feature once rare in the Premier League, as players sought to keep mobility and bargaining power. But not all transformation was positive. For mid-table and lower-tier clubs, the widening wage gap became a survival issue. The top 6 could afford to follow the trend, but others couldn't, at least not without risking financial fair play breaches. Agents began steering top talent towards Champions League clubs, where Haaland-level structures were possible. Some executives warned of a wage bubble, a scenario where salary expectations outpaced club revenues, leading to long-term instability. The cautionary tales from Spain were fresh. Barcelona's wage bill had nearly bankrupted them just a year earlier. Meanwhile, Haaland's own brand was exploding. He wasn't just a city striker anymore, he was a global marketing asset. Deals with Nike, Hyperice, and luxury watch brands meant his off-pitch income rivaled his club wages. In many ways, City's biggest win was not just signing Haaland, but integrating a commercially unstoppable figure into their global strategy. And for Haaland himself? The transformation was personal too. He'd gone from a promising Bundesliga striker to the benchmark for elite football contracts. Every big signing was now measured against his deal. Every young forward's agent mentioned his name in negotiations. By 2024, whispers began about an even bigger move: Real Madrid, PSG, maybe even a record-breaking renewal at City. The numbers being discussed made his current deal look small. Whether he stayed or left, one thing was clear: Haaland hadn't just taken advantage of the Premier League's pay structure, he'd rewritten it. And in doing so, he'd forced every club, from the giants to the strugglers, to rethink what greatness costs.